Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It began not with skyscrapers or subways, but with a humble outpost called New Amsterdam, just a cluster of wooden buildings clinging to the southern tip of Manhattan Island. Founded in the early 1600s by the Dutch as a fur trading hub, it was never meant to become anything more than a commercial way station. But what unfolded over the next 4 centuries was nothing short of a transformation that would shape the destiny of a nation and echo around the globe. Today, that tiny settlement is better known as New York City, a global capital of finance, culture, and innovation. In this journey, we'll peel back the layers of history to see how this city evolved through conquest, commerce, and chaos. From the early days of Dutch settlers and British conquest, to the massive waves of immigrants who passed through Ellis Island in search of a dream. We'll explore how Wall Street was born not just from commerce, but from ambition and risk, and how New York became the financial engine of the world. But it's not just money that built this city, it's the people. Artists, activists, builders, dreamers, waves of humanity from every corner of the earth, colliding and coexisting to create a city that pulses with life and reinvention. Along the way, we'll highlight moments that redefined not just New York, but America itself. The influx of Irish and Italian immigrants, the Harlem Renaissance, the rise of hip-hop, the tragedy of 9/11, and the unbreakable spirit that followed. We'll see how New York became the ultimate American symbol, a place of promise and contradiction, of triumph and tension. So buckle up, because we're about to uncover the raw, riveting, and often messy rise of New York City, from colonial obscurity to becoming the beating heart of a nation and one of the most powerful cities on earth. In 1609, English explorer Henry Hudson, sailing under the Dutch flag, entered the vast harbor of what would one day be New York City. Working for the Dutch East India Company, Hudson was searching for a northwest passage to Asia, but instead he found a natural harbor with immense potential. The area's geography was a dream for traders, a deep-water port for anchoring ships, and the mighty Hudson River cutting a direct path inland. This was a place where goods could flow in and out with ease, a commercial gem waiting to be claimed. By 1624, the Dutch had acted on this promise, establishing a settlement at the southern tip of Manhattan Island. They called it New Amsterdam. It wasn't founded with grand political ambitions, it was purely about commerce. Pelts, especially beaver fur, were the currency of the day. The Dutch West India Company envisioned the colony as a trading post, not a city of culture or politics. Early life in New Amsterdam was far from glamorous. It was a rugged, often chaotic outpost. The settlement was small, the infrastructure fragile, and the future uncertain. But what made it unique from the very beginning was its people. The Dutch, known for a relatively tolerant attitude compared to other colonial powers, allowed settlers of various backgrounds to live and trade in New Amsterdam. Jews fleeing persecution in Brazil, enslaved Africans brought by the company, Walloon Protestants from Belgium, and other Europeans from across the continent began to settle there. This was the foundation of New York's enduring diversity. Despite its commercial roots, conflict and instability were never far away. Native American tribes like the Lenape, who had inhabited the region for generations, found themselves increasingly marginalized as Dutch settlers expanded their territorial claims. What began as trade relationships quickly soured, with land disputes and cultural misunderstandings escalating into violent confrontations. The Dutch, driven by profit and a sense of entitlement to the land, launched brutal campaigns like Kieft's War in the 1640s, an effort to subdue native resistance that resulted in widespread bloodshed and long-standing resentment. These early conflicts foreshadowed the turbulent and often violent dynamics that would define colonization across North America. Yet even amid this friction, New Amsterdam grew. Its strategic location at the mouth of the Hudson River made it a hub of transatlantic commerce. Ships from Europe and the Caribbean brought goods, people, and ideas that gave the colony a uniquely cosmopolitan feel. The Dutch West India Company encouraged settlement from across Europe, attracting a mix of Dutch, English, German, Scandinavian, Jewish, and African peoples, some free, many enslaved. This diverse patchwork of cultures and languages coexisted uneasily, but it laid a powerful foundation. By the mid-1600s, New Amsterdam was still a small, scrappy outpost, but it already showed signs of something greater. Its open market economy, cultural diversity, and restless energy created a society unlike any other in the colonies. It was not orderly or idealistic like the Puritan towns of New England, nor aristocratic like the plantations of the South. It was gritty, competitive, and chaotic, but also dynamic, inventive, and forward-looking. You could already see the rough outline of what New York would one day become, a place where commerce and chaos walked hand in hand, where ambition knew no bounds, and where people from around the world would converge, not always in peace, but always in pursuit of possibility. Even in its earliest days, New Amsterdam was more than a settlement. It was a prototype for a modern metropolis, a microcosm of the complex, often conflicted, but endlessly compelling idea of America itself. In 1664, without firing a shot, the British seized control of New Amsterdam. 4 English warships arrived in the harbor, and faced with overwhelming force and little support from the disgruntled residents, Dutch Governor Peter Stuyvesant surrendered. The city was promptly renamed New York, in honor of the Duke of York, the brother of King Charles II. This marked a turning point. What began as a fur trading post was now under the rule of an empire with broader colonial ambitions, and the city's identity began to shift. Under British rule, New York evolved from a commercial outpost into a colonial powerhouse. Its deep harbor and proximity to the Atlantic made it a natural hub for trade, not just furs, but everything from sugar and rum to enslaved people. The British bolstered the city's infrastructure and solidified it as a central point for transatlantic commerce. By the early 1700s, the port was bustling with ships, and the city was growing rapidly in both wealth and influence. But with this growth came growing tensions. The city was becoming a hotbed of political thought and revolutionary activity. By the mid-18th century, debates over British taxation, mercantilist policies, and the role of monarchy stirred the minds of New Yorkers. Pamphlets were printed, protests erupted, and loyalty to the crown began to fracture. When the American Revolution broke out, New York found itself in a crucial position, both strategically and symbolically. In 1776, the Battle of Brooklyn, also known as the Battle of Long Island, became the largest battle of the entire war. Though a loss for the Americans, it demonstrated how fiercely both sides valued control of New York. Soon after, George Washington and his forces retreated, and the British occupied the city for the rest of the war. During this occupation, New York became more than just a British military hub. It became the nerve center of imperial control in the colonies. Redcoats marched through the streets, Loyalist propaganda filled the taverns, and British ships dominated the harbor. The city, once a vibrant mix of merchants, artisans, and political dissenters, was transformed into a heavily surveilled fortress. For those who remained, many of them loyalists or those too poor to flee, life was marked by scarcity, suspicion, and the ever-present threat of violence. Much of the city was already in ruins from the Great Fire of 1776, which consumed hundreds of buildings shortly after the British took control. Suspected as an act of sabotage by patriots, the fire only deepened tensions. Makeshift prisons like the notorious Sugar House became death traps for captured revolutionaries, where disease and starvation claimed thousands of lives, more, in fact, than on the battlefield. Espionage networks sprang up in secret. Messages, hidden in buttons, invisible ink passed between double agents, and whispers of rebellion carried through back alleys and crowded markets. Even under occupation, the fight for freedom didn't stop. It just went underground. And yet, amid the chaos and fear, the soul of New York refused to be extinguished. It was here that a stubborn, defiant kind of patriotism took root. Not always loud, but always burning just beneath the surface. So when the war finally ended in 1783 and the last British troops evacuated the city in what became known as Evacuation Day, New York emerged battered but proud. Crowds flooded the streets to celebrate. George Washington himself returned to the city in triumph, welcomed not just as a military victor, but as a symbol of the city's unshakable resilience. Though the British had renamed it New York and tried to reshape it in their own image, they had failed to conquer its essence. The city's ambition, its complexity, its hunger for reinvention, all of that remained intact. In many ways, the hardships of occupation forged the city's modern character, tough, resourceful, and relentlessly forward-looking. As the new American Republic began to take shape, New York stood ready to become more than a witness to history. It was ready to help define it. In the early 19th century, New York City began to transform into an unstoppable commercial force, thanks in large part to one monumental engineering achievement, the Erie Canal. Completed in 1825, the canal linked the Hudson River to the Great Lakes, creating a direct water route between the Atlantic Ocean and the vast interior of the North American continent. Suddenly, goods, people, and ideas could move more efficiently and cheaply than ever before. For New York, this was the equivalent of hitting economic gold. The city's port exploded with activity. Farmers from Ohio, traders from Michigan, and industrialists from the burgeoning frontier were now sending their goods through New York's harbor. Ships lined the docks, warehouses overflowed, and the city's population began to surge. Immigration increased, fueled by the promise of opportunity, and the energy of commerce was everywhere, on the streets, in the markets, and especially in a small area that would come to symbolize American capitalism, Wall Street. It was during this period that Wall Street began to rise as a financial power center. Originally just a gathering spot for merchants and brokers, it evolved into a formalized financial system. The New York Stock Exchange was founded in 1817, and by the mid-1800s, banking and investment had become pillars of the city's economy. As trade moved through the Erie Canal and poured into the Atlantic, the financial world in Lower Manhattan found ways to capitalize, insuring ships, funding ventures, and fueling the growth of the nation. But it wasn't just money that was flowing, it was culture too. New York rapidly became the epicenter of American publishing, with newspapers and printing presses booming along Newspaper Row. Publications like the New York Sun and the Herald pioneered mass media, making news more accessible to the growing working class and helping shape public opinion. At the same time, theaters sprang up in neighborhoods like the Bowery, catering to all classes, from high society drama to gritty vaudeville performances. In short, New York was becoming more than just a city. It was becoming a symbol. A place where fortunes could be made, ideas could be heard, and culture could be created. The Erie Canal may have opened the floodgates, but it was New York's grit, ambition, and diversity that turned the city into a true commercial and cultural powerhouse. By the late 19th century, New York City was no longer just a hub of commerce. It had become the gateway to a new life for millions around the world. With the opening of Ellis Island in 1892, the city officially became the entry point for the largest wave of immigration in American history. Between 1892 and 1954, over 12 million immigrants passed through its halls, most arriving with little, more than hope and the clothes on their backs. The influx transformed New York. Irish fleeing famine, Italians escaping poverty, Eastern European Jews running from pogroms, Germans seeking opportunity, all poured into the city, chasing the American dream. Ships unloaded daily, and the streets of Lower Manhattan buzzed with the sounds of dozens of languages. Neighborhoods became ethnic enclaves: Little Italy, Chinatown, the Lower East Side Jewish Quarter. These communities clung tightly to their traditions while trying to navigate a new world. But for many, the promise of prosperity quickly met harsh realities. Tenement buildings, cramped, poorly ventilated, and often unsanitary, became home to entire families living in 1 or 2 rooms. Child labor was common, factory work was brutal, and safety regulations were practically non-existent. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911, which killed 146 garment workers, mostly young immigrant women, would later expose these dangers in horrific detail. Despite the hardship, these immigrant populations shaped the identity of New York in profound ways. Their food, music, languages, and customs brought vibrancy to every street corner, from the kosher delis of the Lower East Side to the Catholic processions winding through the Bronx. They built the city, literally, working in construction, digging subways, and laying the foundation for the skyscrapers that would soon define the skyline. Politically, the immigrant masses found themselves courted and often exploited by political machines like Tammany Hall. Led by figures such as Boss Tweed, Tammany offered favors, jobs, and protection in exchange for votes, becoming a powerful force in the city's governance. While corrupt, these machines also gave immigrants a path to political involvement and community support, when mainstream systems excluded them. This period was one of extremes: explosive growth and deep poverty, vibrant culture and bitter prejudice. Anti-immigrant sentiment often flared, especially during economic downturns, giving rise to nativist movements and restrictive policies. Yet, in spite of these tensions, New York's identity as a melting pot was forged in these very fires of diversity and struggle. It became a city of many peoples, many tongues, many dreams, and that complex, sometimes chaotic mix would go on to define not only New York, but the very idea of America. As the 20th century dawned, New York City entered the industrial age with an energy unmatched anywhere else in the world. Fueled by rapid technological advancement, immigration, and economic power, the city transformed itself into a vertical marvel. The skyline, once defined by church steeples and low-slung buildings, began to stretch into the heavens, an architectural declaration of ambition. The skyscraper boom redefined New York's visual identity. In the 1920s and 1930s, buildings like the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building rose with breathtaking speed and elegance. The Chrysler, completed in 1930, gleamed with its Art Deco spire and steel gargoyles, an ode to both modern engineering and the roaring opulence of its era. Just a year later, the Empire State Building would eclipse it, soaring 102 stories high, becoming the tallest building in the world, and a global symbol of American might during the Great Depression. But New York wasn't just growing upward, it was also building beneath and between. The subway system, first opened in 1904, expanded rapidly to knit the sprawling metropolis together. It was a revolutionary concept, a massive underground transit network that allowed workers, immigrants, and middle-class families to traverse the city affordably. At the same time, monumental infrastructure projects above ground changed how the city connected. The Brooklyn Bridge, completed in 1883, was an engineering marvel of its time. Blending Gothic beauty with functional strength, it linked Manhattan and Brooklyn in a way that forever altered the city's expansion. Grand Central Terminal, completed in 1913, served not only as a transportation hub, but also as a cathedral of movement, its celestial ceiling and Beaux-Arts design celebrating both human achievement and the cosmos. It became a gateway to the city and a monument to the possibilities of American industry. Factories hummed with life, stock markets buzzed with speculation, and Wall Street rose to global prominence. The city's ports were the busiest in the tertiary world, handling goods, mail, and people on an unprecedented scale. During this era, New York became more than a city. It became the face of American modernity, a place where dreams met steel and stone, where art and commerce danced, and where the pace of life set the tone for the rest of the world. The industrial and architectural growth wasn't just about physical transformation. It shaped how the whole world saw America itself. New York became the stand-in for American ambition, a place of towering strength, relentless innovation, and the belief that anything could be built if one dared high enough. As the Roaring Twenties came to an abrupt halt in 1929, New York City found itself at the epicenter of global economic collapse. The Wall Street crash sent shockwaves far beyond the city, but its impact was immediately visible in Manhattan's financial district. Banks shuttered, unemployment soared, and once thriving neighborhoods were gripped by poverty. Bread lines stretched for blocks. Skyscrapers, once symbols of limitless ambition, now cast long shadows over a struggling populace. Yet even in despair, New York began to rebuild. Under Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, the city became a canvas for federal investment. Massive infrastructure projects brought jobs and revitalized urban life. Bridges, parks, and public buildings were erected not only to stimulate the economy, but to provide lasting civic pride. One of the most iconic efforts was the construction of public housing and the expansion of subway lines, reshaping how New Yorkers lived and moved in their city. Then came World War II. New York's ports, factories, and financial institutions roared back to life. The city played a critical role in supplying the Allied effort, producing ships, munitions, and manpower. Its diverse population also contributed to the war in countless ways, from enlistment to labor, further weaving immigrant stories into the national fabric. As troops departed and victory was declared, a new era dawned. The post-war boom transformed New York once again. The city surged with returning veterans, swelling families, and optimism. The baby boom fueled demand for housing, leading to the rise of suburban developments just beyond city limits in places like Long Island and New Jersey. Middle-class families, empowered by the GI Bill and car culture, began to flow outward, while New York itself remained a vibrant economic core. Simultaneously, the city emerged as a cultural powerhouse. The media industry, bolstered by publishing, houses, radio networks, and the explosive growth of television, centered itself in New York. Madison Avenue became synonymous with advertising. Times Square became the electric heart of Broadway. In fashion, New York began to rival Paris, with American designers creating looks that embodied post-war confidence and modernity. By the early 1950s, New York had positioned itself not just as a national leader, but as a global capital. It was the home of the United Nations, a beacon of democratic ideals in a Cold War world. The skyline glittered with innovation, the streets pulsed with ambition, and its people, diverse, determined, and dynamic, continued to push the boundaries of what a city could be. New York had weathered the worst and emerged transformed, not just surviving history, but shaping it. The 1970s and 1980s were tumultuous decades for New York City. The city was grappling with significant challenges, including a surge in crime, a rising drug epidemic, and an economy teetering on the brink of collapse. The infamous image of the city's financial troubles was encapsulated in 1975, when New York came perilously close to declaring bankruptcy, prompting President Gerald Ford's famous "Ford to City Drop Dead" headline in the New York Daily News. At this time, crime was rampant. Muggings, gang violence, and arson plagued neighborhoods, particularly in the Bronx and parts of Manhattan. The financial strain was also evident as businesses fled the city, and public services were cut to the bone. However, by the late 1980s and early 1990s, a dramatic turnaround began. A wave of urban renewal projects, backed by private investment, and local government initiatives began to reshape New York. Neighborhoods once ravaged by crime and disinvestment, like Times Square, underwent massive revitalization. The decline of crime rates, especially with the advent of broken windows, policing and community policing strategies slowly turned New York into a safer city. Real estate boomed, particularly in Manhattan, where high-end condos and new office buildings began rising in the very districts that had once been associated with decay. By the late 1990s and into the 2000s, New York was entering a new era of prosperity. The city was firmly back on its feet, with the cultural renaissance of the 1980s and 1990s laying the groundwork for its role as a global hub. In the world of music, New York's underground scenes, hip-hop in the Bronx, punk rock in the East Village, and jazz in Harlem, gave rise to music genres that would dominate the world stage. Fashion became an international phenomenon, with designers like Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan, and Calvin Klein defining global trends. Wall Street and the finance industry continued to drive the global economy, cementing the city's financial power. However, New York's resilience would be tested, in the most tragic way imaginable. On September 11, 2001, the city and the world was rocked by a terrorist attack that targeted the World Trade Center. The Twin Towers fell, but New Yorkers did not fall. The city's resilience and sense of community were on full display as first responders, city workers, and volunteers helped with the recovery effort, and the city mourned together. The rebuilding of Ground Zero and the construction of the One World Trade Center was a symbol of both loss and renewal, as the city demonstrated its unbreakable spirit. Today, New York City is more than just a place. It's a symbol of the global interconnectedness that defines the modern world. It's the financial capital of the world, a major media and entertainment hub, a beacon for innovation, and a city that celebrates its cultural diversity. The city's skyline, with towering glass buildings alongside historic brownstones, represents a blend of the past and future. The streets are a melting pot of languages, ethnicities, and cultures, a reflection of the millions of immigrants who have come through its doors over the centuries. New York is no longer just a city in America. It is a global city, with influence that extends far beyond its physical boundaries. From tech startups to global finance, the arts to politics, New York continues to shape the future. Its role as the epicenter of global culture, finance, and commerce shows no signs of slowing down. As we look to the future, New York's journey, from a small Dutch trading post to the world's most dynamic metropolis, proves that it's not just about where the city is, it's about where the world is heading. Today, New York City stands as a global city, a shining beacon of finance, culture, technology, and diplomacy. It's not just a city. It's a symbol of global interconnectedness, where every part of the world can be found in its streets, its neighborhoods, and its aspirations. The city is home to Wall Street, the beating heart of global finance, where decisions made in its skyscrapers ripple across the world's markets. The New York Stock Exchange and countless financial institutions continue to wield immense power in the global economy, driving capital, innovation, and trade that influence economies from Asia to Europe and beyond. New York is also an unparalleled cultural powerhouse. It's a city where artists, musicians, and performers push boundaries, creating groundbreaking works that reverberate globally. From Broadway to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the city remains at the forefront of global arts and culture, attracting creatives from all corners of the world. The city's neighborhoods, such as Brooklyn and Queens, are constantly evolving, serving as incubators for the next wave of cultural movements, fashion trends, and artistic revolutions. In addition to culture, New York's influence extends into the world of technology. Silicon Alley, as the tech sector in Manhattan is known, has become a hub for innovation, competing with Silicon Valley in the creation of groundbreaking startups, tech giants, and emerging industries. With a growing presence in AI, biotech, and digital media, New York's tech scene is thriving and constantly attracting new talent, further cementing its place as a leader in the global innovation economy. As the headquarters of the United Nations, New York City also plays a pivotal role in international diplomacy. The UN represents a platform for global cooperation and the pursuit of peace, and New York, as the home of its global headquarters, serves as a meeting ground for leaders and diplomats from every nation, discussing issues of war, peace, climate, and human rights. The city's international significance cannot be overstated. It's a true crossroads of the world. However, despite its many successes, New York faces ongoing challenges that threaten its identity as a truly global city. Affordability remains a critical issue, with skyrocketing housing costs pricing out many longtime residents and making it increasingly difficult for working-class families to call the city home. As a result, economic inequality has only worsened, with a sharp divide between the ultra-wealthy and the growing population of homeless individuals and impoverished communities. The disparities between Manhattan's glittering skyscrapers and the struggling neighborhoods in the Bronx or parts of Brooklyn reflect the broader challenges of wealth distribution and social equity. The immigrant experience, while part of the city's rich history, also continues to present challenges. As the U.S. faces new debates over immigration policy, New York's immigrant communities, many of whom contribute to the city's vibrancy, find themselves navigating political uncertainty, economic hardships, and the complexities of integration. Yet, despite the struggles, the city's immigrant populations remain a core part of New York's identity, contributing to its unique blend of cultures, cuisines, and traditions that make it the global metropolis it is today. Another looming concern is climate change. New York is particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels, with parts of the city already prone to flooding during storms like Hurricane Sandy in 2012. The city has taken steps to address these challenges, investing in infrastructure projects aimed at protecting against storm surges and flooding, but the threat of climate change remains a pressing concern for the future of this iconic city. Despite these challenges, New York City remains a magnet for dreamers, innovators, and adventurers. The city's unique blend of ambition, diversity, and resilience continues to attract people from all over the world who seek to make their mark. Whether it's a young entrepreneur trying to launch a startup, an artist seeking a platform, or a student eager to learn from the best, New York is still the city where anything seems possible. It embodies the American spirit of reinvention and is a living, breathing testament to the belief that in New York, dreams don't just survive, they thrive. Today, New York is a place where the world comes together. It's a city with a rich past, a dynamic present, and an uncertain yet hopeful future. As it faces the complexities of the 21st century, one thing remains clear. New York is not just a city. It's an idea. A place where the world's challenges and aspirations meet head-on, and where, despite the odds, people continue to believe that anything is possible. As we reflect on the incredible journey of New York, from its humble Beginnings as a small Dutch outpost to becoming the global capital it is today, we begin to understand what truly made its rise possible. Its strategic location, positioned between the Atlantic Ocean and the heartland of the United States, allowed it to become the gateway for trade, immigration, and commerce. But beyond geography, it was the ambition of its people, driven by dreams of opportunity and prosperity, that propelled the city forward. New York became a place where the world could converge, bringing together diverse cultures, backgrounds, and ideas, all of which would fuel its transformation into the powerhouse it is today. The resilience of New Yorkers, in the face of war, economic hardship, and crisis, is another key element in the city's growth. Time and time again, New York reinvented itself, whether through industrial booms, cultural revolutions, or in the wake of tragedies like 9/11. Each time the city stumbled, it rose stronger, more determined, and more united in its pursuit of progress. In many ways, New York didn't just grow, it transformed, and in doing so, it helped shape the very identity of America. The city reflects the nation's ideals of freedom, innovation, and the belief that anyone, from anywhere, can make their mark. Whether it's the hustle and bustle of Wall Street, the vibrant art scene, or the dreams of immigrants who arrived on Ellis Island seeking a better life, New York encapsulates the essence of what America represents: a place of endless possibility, reinvention, and hope. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the history of New York City. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories about the places, people, and events that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what you think about New York's rise. What part of its story surprised you the most? Stay tuned for our next video, where we explore another pivotal chapter in history.